Hi everyone, this week it is my chance to give you the end of the week wrap up. Thank you so much to the wonderful Bree for doing week 7, and it's my job to do week 8, and we are going to take it in turns to give you a video at the end of each week to help you to understand the readings and the learning materials a little bit better, we hope. So thank you to the people who put that in their feedback that they would like a bit more help with the learning materials. So I've got a wonderful topic for week 8. I've got policy, which is obviously very important for your last assessment. I really liked this particular framework here, the one that was a part of our discussion this week, because it really shows you how many different elements come together to make policy effective, and all of the different things you've got to consider when you're developing policy. So when you think about your assessment too, you could be looking at this particular diagram and thinking about the impact of the stakeholders, what pedagogical approaches and pedagogy comes into your particular policy, the goals, the philosophy of the centre, curriculum codes, all of those different regulations and laws that we need to connect to. Now, obviously, policy is going to be very broad, and we are thinking about one specific policy, but we are learning about a range of policies within week 8. So to begin with, we are given our reading, which is chapter 5 here, talking about the professional role of policy design. Now, I can see a lot of correlations between the content in this reading and what we need to do in assessment 2. So it just sort of talks, it reminds me a lot of assessment 2 in the way that step 1 is quite broad and talks about policy, not so much policy in general, but the reason why we have policies and why they're important. And, connecting to, obviously, we're all here for the kids, and we need to keep the well-being of the students and the kids in the forefront of our mind, because that's who the policy is protecting. So we're always, especially step 1 of our assignment, linking back to the well-being of children. So we talk a little bit about what policy is, but I'm just going to scroll down because it says here, understanding the purposes of policy. Now, in step 1, where we talk about why policy is important, this particular part of the reading and learning materials can help you to understand why it's important. And a lot of these dot points can be related particularly to step 1 in terms of having transparency, identifying the risks. You need to have consistency. So policy is there to ensure that everyone is on the same page and everyone understands what they're doing, so that the person couldn't turn around and say, I didn't understand that I wasn't supposed to be taking photos of children during the Easter egg hunt. So everyone's on the same page. You can get people to sign, and then you're able to uphold the laws and regulations needed. It's got some great stuff here about, having common guidelines. All of this stuff here within our reading for this week is great for step 1 of your team assessment. So definitely read through this one very carefully. Just going to scroll down a little bit more, where it talks about, again, what policy is and why it's needed. Now, this particular one is also great for step 1 because it links to all of the frameworks that we also need to connect to for step 1, because we don't want to just talk about policy in general. It's a little bit like in assignment 1 where we were talking about leadership. Now, unless we link it to people, places and practices, it's just going to be a general essay about leadership, which could be talking about any industry or any field. So we're always linking strongly back to early childhood settings. So this middle part of our reading links to why it's important in early childhood settings. We probably think it drives us absolutely bonkers having precautions and policies and laws in place, but ultimately we're working with children, so we need to keep them safe, and we always have to have their well-being at the forefront of what we do. So this is another thing that's going to really put us in good stead, reading through this and getting together with your team and talking about some of the key ideas within the reading. Very pertinent to step 1. Now I'm going to keep scrolling down because I want to get to, there's some lovely little stories in there and reflections. But this middle part here, which says step 3, how a policy is created and cared for, and it goes into a little bit of what policy can look like. Now, as well as reading this particular section, because we all know that academic theory is great, but Google around as well. Your job for week 9 is to actually have a look at some examples that you can find. So if you can start looking at that and doing that over the weekend, ready for week 9, and it's also going to hold you in good stead for assessment too, because as I was saying in the little video the other day, you need to see what real policy looks like. You need to see the wording of it. If you have a look, step 2 will make so much more sense to you in terms of the format to get things ready. And then step 3, you'll know what you're aiming for if you can have a look at some real policy. I hope that's helped just give you a little bit of insight into week 8, and we'll see you in the discussion board in week 9.